Now, for this monologue right here, I want to do something different this evening. I want to talk about another sport. The MLS is still on their international break. U.S. men's they dominated Grenada last night, which is expected because, as I said, every country that's outside of North America, Europe, and South America, the U.S. men's soccer team should win every time. And the matches shouldn't even be close. U.S. men should blow them out with any team, either their first team, second team, or third team. If it's not Canada, if they're not playing against Canada, Mexico, any team from South America, any team from Europe, U.S. men should always blow that team out of the park, out of the water. Like, the matches shouldn't even be close. So I don't know if I won't say I'm impressed. It's just something for me as a viewer, for me as a spectator. That's something I expect to see out of Team America when they're not playing a tough opponent like a Mexico, Canada, a team from South America, or a team from Europe. So that's that. As for USL, I'm gonna do another monologue about the USL because I'm not really impressed from what I'm seeing out of the USL so far, the USL Championship League. I just think that there's more they can do to set themselves apart from the MLS and for them to be a little more entertaining. I think if out of all the leagues in this continent, at least the USL, you're trying to reach to the level of the MLS. You have those kind of aspirations, at least USL Championship Division. I believe that you should be the league where we see more offense, where we see more scoring. A lot of times you kind of look similar to the MLS, which is not bad, but I expect you to be a little more progressive. Since you're on that lower level, I really expect you to be more like the innovator. But that's going to be for another monologue. Now, remember in Monologue 50, where I was telling you about change and how a shift in power is taking place in traditional football, where you're going to see America and the MLS in general, they're going to grow in power. They're eventually going to reach the level of the English Premier clubs. They're going to reach the power of the Big Five English Premier Leagues. They're going to reach the level of power of the top South American leagues. Now, for South America, I really don't know what are the top leagues in South America. But I know the top countries. You got Brazil, you got Argentina, you got Colombia, Uruguay. I know the big countries, but I'm not sure if there's any big leagues in South America like it is in Europe. But I know the individual leagues that's there, they have some form of power because throughout the history of FIFA World Cup, the only countries that have won are countries out of either Europe and South America. Throughout the entire history of the FIFA World Cup, there has never been any other country. There has not been any country outside of South America and Europe to win the World Cup. However, that's eventually going to change based on the shift of power that's taking place. Within the next 20 to 50 years, you're going to see America, Canada, and Mexico if they want to, but largely America and Canada, they're going to have more power and they're going to be more visible to the world than ever before. And if you're the USL, you got to be very careful because there's a possibility that the Canadian Premier League can overtake you as being the third biggest league in North America. Anyhow, change is not traditional football. Soccer is not the only sport where change is taking place. Change is also taking place in the college football realm. Now, for me personally, I'm a little more familiar with college football than I am with traditional football, than I am with soccer. College football has been on the TV screen way longer than soccer. And to be honest with you, the only reason why people like me and others are getting more familiar with soccer is because of the internet and because of ESPN Plus. if the internet and ESPN Plus still didn't exist, I wouldn't know anything about the MLS. I wouldn't even know that the MLS exists. Now, change is also taking place in college football. Like, you see these constant realignments taking place. Now, a lot of people want to blame this due to the pandemic, but this has been going on forever throughout the history of college football. Like, for example, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma flirting with the SEC is nothing new. These three colleges have been flirting with the SEC way before the new millennium, way before the 2000 century, way before even the 1990s. I'll say at least like ever since the 60s, somewhere between the 60s and the late 80s. These three schools have been flirting with SEC membership. Texas A&M, and Oklahoma joining the SEC. This is something that should have been done either in the late 90s, either in the early 90s or the late 80s. But because of political intervention from politicians in Texas, such was never able to happen. But as these schools grew more in power and they started to get more money, it got to a point where the politicians couldn't control them and the politicians couldn't tell them what to do. It got to the point where they were telling the politicians what to do, where the politicians turned into lobbyists for them and they were no longer being controlled. But now they're the ones that's in control. That's an example of change. Schools who once did not have power grew to a point where they gained so much money and so much clout and so much support. It got to the point where they now have the power. And let me tell you something about change. There's nothing wrong with change. Many people think that when they hear change, they think it's automatically bad. Like, in life, in sports in general, there has to be balance. You can't live life being 100% conservative, and at the same time, you can't live your life being 100% progressive. There needs to be some kind of balance, because with balance, you function properly. Now, to my European subscribers who may not know much about college football, let me tell you something about college football. College football, the way college football operates is kind of similar to the way that the European football leagues operate. Like the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Big 12, Pac-12. Those are your big five college football leagues. And then in European football, your big five leagues are English Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, Bundesliga, and League One. So those are your big five European leagues. And the 10 of those, and the 10 of those leagues combined, they operate similarly. They recruit their players. That's one thing. That's one similarity they have, is recruiting. All 10 of these leagues are big on recruiting. Recruiting is like the bloodline of these businesses. Another thing that's similar, like these 10 leagues, they have huge fan support. Like the fan support in American college football is way much larger and much bigger than the fan support in the NFL. Now, why is that, you may wonder? It's because the college leagues, they're more invested in the community. They have a better relationship with the community. And also, the community they're more involved in the development of these programs. Like, these college programs are not solely ran by rich elite. Like, a lot of these programs accept donations from the average blue collar guy who has a job at Amazon, or he has a job for the Ford company or General Motors. You know, the average guy can invest in these college football programs and they can see the fruit of their labor. They can see where their money is going to. Rather than the NFL is more controlled by elites, the 1%, the wealthiest of wealthies. This is why college football is more popular than the NFL. This is one of the reasons why, because the community has more of a hand on the finished product. The community, the people, and the students, like the people in general, is more involved. So it feels more like family when it comes to the business operations of college football, rather than NFL is just the 1%. So that's why college football is more popular than the NFL in this country, especially in the Southeast. The Southeast and certain parts of the Midwest, like Ohio, Iowa, maybe Michigan. But yeah, largely the Southeast. Now, this league, I'm going to say it's a league. I mean, it operates as a professional league, but it's not officially a professional league because, it's the colleges. They're affiliated with colleges. They're not controlled by the colleges now. They're affiliated with the colleges. So from the outside looking in, it still seems like they're academic institutions because, the players are still enrolled in the schools or whatever. So yeah, on paper, they are academic institutions, but in reality, these are professional businesses. They operate as professional businesses. Many people lose their jobs from the outcome of these games. And a lot of these schools, a lot of the academic programs, they make money off of these games and off of the players and just the business operation of the things. Anyhow, change in this league. So that's why I'm calling it a league. Change in this system, this professional system, has been going on for a long time. First you had the voting system where journalists and media members voted who were the national champions. Then it evolved to the BCS, where it was a computerized point system. After the BCS, you have college football playoffs, where the SEC, which is the largest college football league in the country, where they decide who gets to make the playoffs and who doesn't get to make the playoffs. Now, after the SEC, you have NIL, name, image, and likeness. Name, image, and likeness is getting ready to overtake the college football playoffs when it comes to evolution and how the game is going to be ran and how the game is going to be controlled. NIL, there's a possibility that NIL is going to bring some balance to all the power that the SEC has. Because of NIL, a lot of the power that the SEC have is going to decrease a little bit. Now, this is still developing, but I'm letting you know right now, NIL is going to bring a balance of power for the Power Fives, for the SEC, ACC, Big 10, Pac-12, Big 12. Now, so that's an example of change. Now, is it a good thing? I don't know. It's subjective. I'm not sure if it's good or bad. But one thing I do know, the gap between the haves and the have-nots will continue to increase. That's the thing about change in college football. Like, whenever some form of change takes place, the group of colleges that are already rich, they usually become richer. The ones that are not as rich, they stay where they are. And while some actually start to lose money, then there are some who are not rich, but they get to that level of rich. They get to that level of wealth. They get to that level of power. And there's a few that are doing that. An example, you got your UCFs, your Cincinnati's, your Georgia States, UAB, which can be a good comeback story someday, how they shut down their program and came back. And now they're looking better than a lot of the Power 5 programs that never closed their program, that never shut down. Whether it's good or bad, the thing that I want you to know the most, that change is happening in the college football realm. And whether you like it or not, whether you're ready for it or not, change is coming. Now, here's 2 books that I want you to read if you haven't done so already. The 50-Yard Seduction by Keith Donovan and $1 Billion Ball by Gilbert M. Gall. These 2 books are very insightful, and they'll give you so much information about college football that you didn't even know about. Like, I've been watching that sport ever since I was a kid, but when I started reading those 2 books, there's things that were going on that I didn't even know was happening. So those 2 books are very educational. They're very eye-opener. They tell you about like how the sport has evolved from the poll system, from people voting the national champions to the BCS champion to the college football playoff, and all the recruiting and how and the business, like the stuff that the media don't really tell you about. It just gives you an idea of why some of these schools got in trouble in the past, like the way they did, and how they grew and evolved. Well, there's one school that I really, really want to talk about. And there's one school that I'm really amazed on how far they have fallen ever since the 60s. And that's the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Now, if you watch college football today, you would think that in the state of Georgia, that the Georgia Bulldogs have always been the best team, that the Georgia Bulldogs have always been the most dominant team, and that Georgia Tech, by far, they have never been on the same level as the Georgia Bulldogs. But what if I told you that's not true? What if I told you that there's a time where Georgia Tech was actually better than the Georgia Bulldogs? What if I told you that there's a time where Georgia Tech was a bigger rival to Alabama and Auburn than the Georgia Bulldogs? What if I told you that when it came to college football in the South, that the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets was the face, the college football team of the state? It was the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. But guess what happened to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets? Change came. And for them, change happened for them in a bad way. Why? Because at one point in time, the SEC implemented a 140 rule. And the 140 rule, it limited scholarships. A certain amount of scholarships that football teams and men's basketball teams, or just basketball teams in general, can have. And Bobby Dodd, who was not only the head football coach for the Yellow Jackets, but also the athletic director at the time for the Yellow Jackets, he didn't like that rule. He didn't support that rule. And he wanted Alabama's Bear Bryant to support him in getting rid of that rule. But because the University of Alabama actually supported the rule, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets decided to leave the SEC. And the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets leaving the SEC will go down as one of the biggest mistakes that a college football program has ever done. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets leaving the SEC will go down as one of the worst decisions in Southern football history. Not only college football, but just rugby style football in general, NFL and college football combined. As a matter of fact, sports history. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets deciding to leave the SEC will go down. If it's not the biggest mistake, the worst decisions in Southern sports history, it'll definitely go down as one of the worst decisions in Southern sports history. The Georgia Bulldogs instantly became the premier team in the state of Georgia for Southern college football. The Georgia Bulldogs instantly, within a few years, started outperforming Tech. And ever since Tech left the SEC, I believe it was like in the 60s, in the early 60s, the early 1960s, they have never been the same. Now, every now and then, they had decent seasons, but that high level of competition, that high level of just, look, Georgia Tech was up there with the Notre Dames and the Alabamas and the Penn States. Georgia Tech was on that level. Since they left the SEC, they have dropped. They fell. And they never really rose back to that same level. All because of pride from a coach and an athletic director who got a stadium named after him. Up to this day, the stadium's still named Bobby Dodd Stadium, Georgia Tech's football stadium. But it's that same Bobby Dodd. His actions, his prideful actions from the 60s is the reason why Georgia Tech is in the state that it's in right now. A decision that was made in the 60s is still affecting a team in the 2020s. And this is something that Georgia Tech, they can't even address it because it's too embarrassing. It's just too shameful. Georgia Tech has fallen down to a level where schools like South Alabama, Appalachian State, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Kennesaw State, those schools are just as good, if not better than Georgia Tech right now. And I believe that this is something that can go, this will be a good 30 for 30 someday, whenever the time comes. A decision that was made in the 1960s is still affecting a team in the 2020s. And this is what I mean about change. I mean, this is what I'm saying about this. This is the thing about change. Whether change is good or bad, change can have an everlasting effect on you. Change can have an everlasting effect on a sports program for generations. And this is what we're seeing with Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech used to be one of the most prestigious programs, not only in the South, but all in college football. At one point in college football, there used to be only 3 football teams that had their own television deal. At one point, it was only 3. Notre Dame, University of Pennsylvania, which is another school that has fallen tremendously because of the Ivy League and the NCAA. They basically bullied that school. They threatened, look, did you know that the Ivy League threatened to kick the University of Pennsylvania out of being from Ivy League status because they were investing so much into football? Because the University of Pennsylvania wanted to become a football power, not Penn State now. The reason Penn State is similar to how Georgia benefited off of Georgia Tech's fall. Penn State benefited off of the University of Pennsylvania's fall. Because the NCAA and the Ivy League, they bullied and feared the University of Pennsylvania to a point where the University of Pennsylvania stopped investing in football like the way it was. The University of Pennsylvania was trying to be on the same level as Notre Dame. They're going in that direction. But like I was saying, at one point in college football, there was only 3 schools that had their own TV deal. It was Notre Dame, University of Pennsylvania, and Georgia Tech. Now, if you read the book, The 50-Year Seduction, you'll know what I'm talking about. It talks more about that. So I'm not going to elaborate too much on that. So I don't know if Georgia Tech is ever going to bounce back, but as you watch college football this year, that's just one school I encourage you just to study, just to pay close attention to. I'll be doing the same thing too. Just pay close attention to that school. Just study it. Just see how things are. You know, I used to be the type of person when I was watching sports, I just used to focus on X's and O's and whatever, trying to understand how the game operates. But that's kind of boring to me. I'm starting to realize that and it's a little irrelevant, to be honest with you. X's and O's, it's a little irrelevant, just a little bit. Because the thing, as I get older, I'm starting to realize that sports is much bigger than X's and O's. There's a lot of socioeconomic factors and political factors that tie into sports that affects the society. Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC is not only about football. It's an economic change that's taking place in the South. And many schools in the South are unionizing together to sustain their heritage and to sustain their economy and to save their heritage. But I'm not going to get too much into that. But just if you want to learn a lot about American history, I encourage you to watch college football. Like, you can really learn about American history by watching a football game. And I'm so serious. And as we get closer to the season, I'm going to talk more about college football because there is so much American history that you can get out of watching these games. These games are bigger than sports. It's bigger than entertainment. And I'll just leave it at that.
Life moves fast when you're after a task, and there's cries and there's laughs and there's harmony glass. There's spills and refills and they all seem to clash. The future is past in this harmony glass. Life moves fast when you're after a task, and there's cries and there's laughs and there's harmony glass. There's spills and refills and they all seem to clash. The future is past in this harmony glass.